continuing to discuss Sri Vishnu Sahasranama, name 758, Su-medhah, which means of good intelligence, of superior intelligence, and so on. Taking a bit of a diversion here in discussing this name, inasmuch as not directly discussing his intelligence, but discussing our intelligence and our aspirations to be intelligent. And from this perspective, seeing how futile are our endeavors to, or how foolish are our endeavors to be big and brainy, and because his superintelligence is always going to be infinite and ours is always going to be infinitesimal or infinitesimal, as Srila Prabhupada used to pronounce it. It is a feature of Maya, of being an illusion, that people like to be honored for being intelligent. If someone is reputed as being intelligent, that's one kind of fame. It's one kind of opulence to be highly knowledgeable, learned, quick, sharp, intelligent. We don't like to be called a fool, or someone is respected for being very brainy. In this regard, I'll read from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, from Madhya Lila, chapter 8. Those of you who are very much into studying Chaitanya Charitamrita know that Madhya Lila chapter 8 covers the conversation between, or the conversations between, a synopsis of the first series of conversations between Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Ramananda Rai on the banks of the Godavari. So there are several sections in that conversation. One of them is discussion of sadhya sadhana tattva, the goal of life and how to attain it. Questions and answers. And the next series of questions and answers is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's questions on various topics. The first of which goes as follows. Prabhu kohe, kon bidda bidda modhesha. Rai kohe, Krishna bhakti bina bidda nahiya. Srila Prabhupada's translation. On one occasion, the Lord inquired, of all types of education, which is the most important? Ramananda Rai replied, no education is important other than the transcendental devotional service of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's purport, text 245 to 257 are all questions and answers between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai. And note again, this is out of all the questions Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, this is the first on the topic of education, vidya, knowledge. Continuing Prabhupada's purport. In these exchanges, there is an attempt to show the difference between material and spiritual existence. Education in Krishna consciousness is always transcendental and is the best of all forms of education. Material education aims at increasing the activities of material sense gratification. Beyond material sense gratification is another negative form of knowledge called Brahma Vidya, or impersonal transcendental knowledge. But beyond that Brahma Vidya, or knowledge of the impersonal Brahman, is knowledge of devotional service to the Supreme Lord Vishnu. This knowledge is higher, and higher still is devotional service to Lord Krishna, which is the topmost form of education. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, Text 49, Tat karma haritosham yat sa vidya tanmatiryaya. Work meant for pleasing the Supreme Lord is the best, and education that enhances one's Krishna consciousness is the best. Also, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, Texts 23 and 24, Shravanam kirtanam Vishnu smaranam pada sevanam archanam vandanam dasyam sakhyam atmanivedanam iti pungsarpita Vishnu bhaktischaina valakshana Kriyeta bhagavatya dhatan manye dhitam uttamam. This is a statement given by Prahlad Maharaj in answer to a question raised by his father. Actually, here in the purport it's not given, but the specific importance of quoting these famous verses here is that the question raised by his father was, what is the best thing you have learned? So it concerns education, which is the topic under discussion. So Prahlad Maharaj said, to hear or chant about Lord Vishnu, to remember him, to serve his lotus feet, to worship him, to offer prayers to him, to become his servant and his friend, to sacrifice everything for his service. All these are varieties of devotional service. One who is educated in such activities is understood to be educated to the topmost perfection. So that's the best we can do as far as our education and our knowledge is concerned. How can we develop our intelligence to the highest level? We can be Su-medhah. We can be of good intelligence, but we can never be on the same level as the Supreme Lord. And understanding that is the symptom of Su-medhah for the conditioned soul. He is Su-medhah. That is one of his names here in Vishnu Sahasranama. The name, this particular name, is not exclusive to him. Some of the names in Vishnu Sahasranama are exclusive to him. Some are not. When we say what names are specific to him, Lakshmi, that's a name. It's a male form of the name, which is in, well, you could straight, we haven't come to that name yet. Punya Shravana Kirtana, we haven't come to that name yet. A name of Lord Vishnu in Vishnu Sahasranama. It is auspicious to hear and chant about him. We may say, well, it's auspicious to hear and chant about his devotees also. Yes, but only because they're in relationship with him. Then a name, here's a name which is not in Vishnu Sahasranama. Garuda Vahana, he who has Garuda as his vehicle. So I may say, well, that's specific to him. And sometimes Satyabhama travels with him also. But some names are specific to him. When we say Keshava, he has beautiful hair, that could be applicable to others, but then if we take it in the sense he is the master of Brahma and Shiva, then that's only Vishnu. Vishvam, the first name of Vishnu Sahasranama, that's applicable to him only. He is the universe. Vishnu, although some in Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya they say that all pervasiveness also applies to Lakshmi, some one, anyway, the point I'm making here, without getting off track, is that some names in Vishnu Sahasranama can very well be applied to deserving jivas also. Su-medhah is of course yajanti hi su-medhah saha. That comes up in famous verse of Bhagavatam. But there's a difference in the application of it. To say that a jiva is Su-medhah means he's understood his position of complete subordination to the Supreme Lord. It doesn't mean his intelligence and his knowledge is on the same level of that of the Supreme Lord. Someone may be considered a genius. There are highly intelligent people. There are some people, when you meet them or simply try to read their writings, you can understand they're on some level of intelligence way, way, way up there. It's however much I study in this life, I'll never come to their level. They can grasp things and explain things, but they're not necessarily all geniuses. I personally know several, members of this movement who are really very, very bright, really in a different level. Sadhaputa Prabhu passed away. When you speak with him, although was a very unassuming person, you can understand that he's just got an intelligence which is on a very high level. Rasaraj Prabhu, another in the science field, although he didn't get on with Sadhaputa, they had some disagreements. They're just very, very intelligent people. Genius, very, very intelligent means even in the scientific community in which they work in the specialized fields they work in, they're recognized by others in that field to be special. Genius, what? Maybe there's some scale or something. The Einstein, the Da Vinci. By karma, you can become a genius. If someone really has a desire to be very, very learned. Actually, previously in India, it was a common thing that the Brahmins, it was so learned, and so we hear of the descriptions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, so deeply learned, and not just in learning, but nyaya means debating on logic, means you have to be really sharp in your intelligence, in applying that knowledge. And there's still such kinds of discussions go on up to the present day, but very rarely in Sanskrit. Even to learn Sanskrit requires actually spoken Sanskrit is not that difficult if you pick it up as a child, like any language. Just like Russian is supposed to be a difficult language. Tamil is a different language. It's not difficult for those who know it. But there's a certain level of, a high level of intelligence. So like someone like myself could be called above average, and then there are others who are in a different level up above myself, and then there are others who are way, way up there. How do you get that? Well, by good karma, by performing pious activities with the desire to be very learned, one can be born with very high intelligence. Or, by good karma, you can be born as a demigod, and automatically your intelligence is so much greater. We hear of the scriptures in the heavenly worlds, Ramayana, Mahabharata. They're much, much bigger, many more verses than is presently extant in the world today, here on this earth, because they've got more capacity to absorb all of that. Any average demigod might be considered a genius who came to this earth. And of course a genius generally was a demigod in the previous life. And that some of that good karma is still coming on. But if If you're in the heavenly worlds and you have an intelligence the level of Einstein, you wouldn't be considered a genius. You'd just be considered normal. You might be considered a bit odd why you're studying all these things. They would, Brihaspati, the guru of the demigods, he doesn't apply his intelligence to trying to understand the intricacies of how the material energy works in the same way that Einstein does. Their intelligence is dedicated to understanding the intricacies of Vedic knowledge. We see that here in India, parents are very concerned to get their children very highly educated, and it's for get a good education, what they call a good education, then you get a good job, and then you get good money. But it's also prestige is very much a factor for recognition and distinction, and then money is definitely a factor. But that's stupid. That's not intelligent to want to have lots of money and to be recognized. And that's to have that as the burning ambition of your life, and therefore you spend your youth deeply in study of all the kind of things that they call education. Here, I just read from the purport of Chaitanya Charitamrita, material education aims at increasing the activities of material sense gratification. So to pursue that is not intelligent. Intelligence begins with discerning what we should apply our intelligence to. Otherwise, you can spend your whole life barking up the wrong tree. There's an English saying, barking up the wrong tree. The idea is a dog is chasing a cat. The cat runs into a little orchard or forest grove, bounds up a tree, and the dog comes bounding up behind and barking up the tree. But the cat's up another tree. So in the same way, we are applying our intelligence and becoming renowned as a rocket scientist or a virusologist or a mathematician, but without knowledge, without applying our intelligence to understand the ultimate goal of life. So that's not intelligent. One may be intelligent, but unintelligent at the same time. And someone may not be very intelligent, but may be of the highest intelligence at the same time. In this regard, there is a story of the boatman and the scholar, which appeared in an early Back to Godhead magazine. In former times, it was common here in India and anywhere else in the world where there weren't so many bridges. Crossing rivers, you'd get in a boat. There were ferry boats. The boatmen would ferry people across the river. So the story goes. One scholar comes to the bank of the river, gets in the boat, the ferryman starts. It's a wide river, maybe kilometer wide or something like that. From where I come from in England, that was unimaginable, but when I was there, I've seen Ganga so wide you can hardly see the other side at certain places, especially in the rainy season, which is going on now. So the ferryman is taking the scholar over the river, and the scholar sees some birds flying in the sky, and he excitedly points them out to the boatman and said, "Oh, it's a very rare species." The boatman's, "Yeah." And the scholar says the scientific name of them. And the ferryman says, just looks like a duck, looks like a few ducks to me. And the scholar says scornfully, what? You've never you don't know the scientific names of the birds flying around? You don't know ornithology? What? Of course, I'm saying it in English, but so you haven't studied ornithology? You've wasted 25% of your life. Then, seeing various cloud formations in the sky, the scholar says, "Oh, look, there's clouds," and he gives the scientific name of the clouds. And the boatman, again, he never heard the scientific name of the clouds. And so, you've never studied meteorology? What? Oh, you've wasted 50% of your life. And then, you've never heard of ornithology or meteor? You never even heard of ornithology or meteorology? I never went to school. Oh, you wasted 75% of your life. And those clouds, they're storm clouds, and quite soon a storm begins, and the boat starts to capsize in the storm, and as they're capsizing, the boatman asks the scholar, "Do you know how to swim?" "No, you've wasted 100% of your life." And that's the story. The boatman, as he's going along, he's chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. He doesn't bother so much about all the... So he's not very highly educated, but he knows to chant Hare Krishna. Whereas the scholar is highly educated, but he's not interested in chanting Hare Krishna. He's bewildered by his acquisition of so-called wealth. Joro Bidda, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Joto Maya Bhaibhav Tomar Bhajane Badha. Moha Janamiya Anitya Sangsare Jeev Ke Kare Gadha. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that materialistic knowledge is simply a display of the Krishna's illusory energy. Attachment to it is an obstacle in advancement in Krishna consciousness. It simply increases the illusion in this world where everything is temporary. You may be a big brain now, and then you may be a worm in stool in your next life. And it makes, already in this life, it makes you into a donkey, like a donkey. Because you're simply working hard without realizing or thinking, what should I actually be doing? She gadha hoye. What does that say? She gadha hoye bidda bahino. Bahinu onekakal. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that for so much time of my life I wasted in materialistic studies. So you may become, by studying, a material success, but all too often material success means spiritual failure, or the very idea that I will be materially successful. To be fascinated by the idea, I have to become a success. That means you're already a spiritual failure. Even if you're chanting Hare Krishna, if one is enamored by the idea of becoming successful, then you're already a spiritual failure. Often the people who are very intelligent, they're not very materially rich or opulent. They're not interested in such things. They know that these things, as one increases one's material opulence, one simply increases one's anxiety and so many things you have to look after, and your spiritual life goes down. Which brings us to this studying the Bhagavad Gita. What do you need for studying the Bhagavad Gita? You don't need anything. One disciple was told by his guru, you go and study. You take Bhagavad Gita and go and study. Make that the focus of your life. So he went and found some cave to live in, and then he would go out to some local village and beg some food, and he didn't need anything. He had everything is provided by nature, by God. So he's studying Bhagavad Gita, but then sometimes he found when he went out to beg for food, then he'd come back and find the rats chewing away on his Bhagavad Gitas, the mice. So he got a cat. Now, what do I need? I need a cat. Okay, he got a cat, found a cat. That'll keep the mouse away. But then the cat they chased all the mice away, or eaten all the mice, and then the cat still needs to look after the cat, otherwise more mice will come, so the cat is hungry. Meow, 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 meow. So, okay, I have to get a cow. So he begs a cow, and then the cow also, it's a lot of work looking after cows. So he has to feed the cow and this and that, and not much time for studying Bhagavad Gita. So what'll I do? Okay, I'll get a wife to look after the cow. So he gets a wife to look after the cow, and then the wife says, I don't want to live in a cave. Okay, let's go and live in the village. And then he got to live in the village, and then the wife, I don't want to live in this little house. So he has to increase his material affairs until he has a big palace. And one day the guru comes to visit him. What's all this big palace? He said, well, it's for studying Bhagavad Gita. He'd forgotten all about studying Bhagavad Gita. Material entanglement comes from desire for distraction from our spiritual focus. Therefore, simple living is very conducive for high thinking. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I was just quoting him, he was highly intelligent and highly placed in government service. But he also wanted to retire as soon as possible, which he did, because he felt that being a material success, although it was useful for his preaching of Krishna consciousness at that time, because he wanted to impress among the educated and influential section of society in Bengal at that time, he wanted to impress upon them at least the rectitude of the real followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Not that they're all debauchees. But he also, he retired. So, by good karma you can become a genius. I've seen devotees, they come from, several times I've seen, they come from not very educated background, and not at all educated actually, but they have this desire, I want to be educated, I want to speak English, and I want to get a college degree and this and that, but they just don't have the basic stuff here to do it. Another case of a young man who recently came to one of our farm communities and said, I just want to work. That's all. I can chant Hare Krishna and work. And he'd left home. His parents are pushing him. You have to study, study, study. And they were pushing him in the college to study. And he was failing the exam every time. He just didn't. They were trying to make him into something he wasn't meant for. They were trying to make him into a highly educated. But he wasn't, he had enough intelligence to understand, I'm not meant for this. And he simply came to our farm and is working hard. That's what he's meant for. You can say it is good karma to have the mental apparatus to be able to become well educated. Janmaishvarya Shruta Shri. These are the 4 prominent symptoms of good karma. Means birth in a high family, birth in a wealthy family, or otherwise acquisition of wealth. Shruta, to be well educated, and Shri, to be physically attractive, bodily features. But these are all meaningless in terms of the real goal of life, which is to understand we have nothing to do with any of this anyway. And they're obstacles towards spiritual advancement. If we become enamored with these, Janmaishvarya Shruta Shri Bhir, Edamana Madah Puman, Naiva Hatyabitatum Vai, Twama Kinchana Gochara. Kunti Rani prays to Lord Krishna that birth in a high family, material opulence, wealth, high learning, education, intelligence, beautiful bodily features, one becomes bewildered and proud by all these things, and by that pride we can't get Krishna, who is the available, who makes himself available to persons who have no aspirations in material existence. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, coming from a situation of Janmaishvarya Shruta Shri, he had all these things. Well, in wealth, it apparently not so much, although he was the husband of the goddess of fortune, but he showed himself to be from an average Brahmin family. And generally the Brahmins, they didn't aspire after great wealth, but he was living opulently and comfortably. But he also said, Dinere adhik daya kare Bhagavan, kulin pandit dhanir bharo abhiman. That those who are considered less prestigious or lower in human society, they are more eligible for the mercy of the Supreme Lord, because persons who are bewildered, are enamored by their high birth, by their great intelligence and learning, and by their wealth, they have big ego problems. So that's good karma to have all these things, wealth, good birth, all this kind of thing. But it's a cycle, isn't it? Because you do pious activities, you get a good birth, and then you become proud, and then you perform sinful activities, you mistreat others, and then by that you go down. And then when you go down, if you're a little bit pious, you pray to God, and then you go up, and you go up and down and around and around. So really spiritual knowledge, seeking after spiritual knowledge, is the real beginning of intelligence. To see, I'm just on a Ferris wheel going up and down. Good karma. Who wants good karma? If we could have good karma, healthy body, all these things, wealth, and be Krishna conscious, or be in a materially destitute position, struggling with health and all these, and be Krishna conscious, what's the best? The answer is, there really is no difference. It can be measured only by the Krishna consciousness. It's better to be unhealthy, for instance, and be Krishna conscious, than to be healthy and to not be Krishna conscious. Or even if one's level of Krishna consciousness, one can be in Krishna consciousness with health and wealth, but if it's at a lower level than someone who doesn't have health and wealth, then the person without the health and wealth and with more Krishna consciousness is better situated from the absolute point of view. That's very difficult for materialistic people to understand, but it's a fact, because the only real welfare is to be Krishna conscious, and to understand that is actually intelligent. The idea of enjoying this material world and being Krishna conscious, that's exactly what keeps us in this material world, in a pious situation. We don't get love of Krishna because we have material aspirations. So this good karma that can manifest in various ways. Someone is a genius, someone is different kinds of genius also. Einstein, the scientific genius, Napoleon, the political and military genius, and Picasso. Well, he's highly lauded as a great artist, although personally, this modern art is an expression of insanity, insane genius. But good karma it's not necessarily being super big. If you have, especially at the present time, if someone is born into a family situation which is steady, the parents and the people they associate with are supportive, the parents don't fight with each other, they actually love their children and they train their children to be good people and not misbehave, respectful of elders and so on. That in itself, especially at the present time, that could be considered pretty good karma. Because a lot of children are getting born into families where the home situation is not conducive to material, even if they have money, but the atmosphere is so bad that people are not happy at all. But then you get some people who they're just like a genius from the beginning. Mozart, musical genius. Who taught him? Where did it come from? At the age of 5, he was composing sonatas, and it just, no, wait a minute, by the age of 9, by the age of 5 he wrote minuets. By the age of 9 he was writing symphonies. I think if I tried to study now and really tried, although I don't have that inclination to do that, if I really studied music, could I ever compose a symphony in this lifetime? Maybe. Doubtful. But would it be on the level of Mozart? No, that's not doubtful. It's just no. That's the answer. Here are a couple of quotes about genius from a couple of people who themselves were highly educated, highly talented, highly intelligent, so that they are remembered to the present day for their intellectual contributions. Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher who was a great fan of the Upanishads, he marks the difference between just being talented and intelligent and genius. He said, talent hits a target no one else can hit, or others find hard to hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. That would be very fitting for Einstein, wouldn't it? That saying. If one is very talented inside, then you can begin to understand the kind of things that Einstein was discussing. But to take the whole conversation to a new level, new frontiers. Well, here we go, new frontiers. Arthur Koestler. Again, I may not be very expert in pronouncing these Germanic kind of names. Another Arthur. He said, the principal mark of genius is not perfection, but originality, the opening of new frontiers. So it's similar. That's material genius, to discover something, to open up a new path, something completely different. Think outside the box. But you're always within We're always boxed in material consciousness, material existence. Think outside the box means to think, whatever I am doing, have done, and will do, and whatever everyone else is doing, has done, and will do, in the present frame of consciousness, the present box is a box that makes us think that I belong in this material world. Get out of the box. Jump out of the box. Jump out up to spiritual consciousness. That may develop also. I was talking about reincarnation. How do you explain that Mozart had such talent? Einstein had such talent. Reincarnation, it's carrying on karma. But then it may be from a previous life also that one has the inclination to pursue spiritual knowledge, to see everything in this world is temporary and useless. Tatra tam buddhi samyogam labhate purvadehikam. Lord Krishna says that someone who is the yogi, he may be born in a family or in a situation which he's not perfect, so he gets born in a situation where he can pursue his spiritual inclinations again, and then in due course of time, those inclinations rise up again in his heart. So, you want to be a genius? Parents in India, make your child a genius. It's a foolish aspiration unless one understands what is the real meaning of life. What is it? Where should the intelligence be applied? Like I say, there's so many intelligent people have come and gone. They really pick up concepts very fast and grasp them and so on. But what's the use if you die ignorant of the real purpose of life, which is to know Krishna? What's the use? What is the use? It just you excelled in society for some time. One other thing is that if you are very intelligent, I would imagine it's quite lonely, actually. I heard that Einstein, there are hardly two or three people in the world he could even talk with, the things that were going on in his mind. I had a problem like that myself. Like super brain or anything, but traveling in the villages in Bangladesh, because mostly the people at that time, most of the people didn't have any formal education. Very simple people. I learned many, 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 many things from them. But as far as intellectual discourse, it was hard to find, especially in the villages. There was no intellectual discourse. We weren't going to the towns for various reasons, and even in the towns, intellectual people, for historical reasons, especially the Hindu intellectuals that either left for India or been killed, and there weren't that many left. So I was quite lonely in some ways. All of the things, the level of thought that I'm at it's difficult to relate to. I mean, it wasn't impossible to relate to the people. Obviously, I spent some years there, but sometimes you want to discuss with people in a manner that gives you. It's just like if you have muscles in your body and you don't use them, you feel like you want to get out and jump and maybe lift up some weights or something. You feel you want to use it. So I experienced that, and I can imagine for people who are super brainy, it might be a bit lonely. Who do they discuss with at all? There may be disadvantage, that kind of disadvantage of being so brainy. Even I discuss sometimes with some devotees, and they also felt that they've expressed to me that it's hard to find anyone who you can discuss, even in our movement, to discuss philosophy at a deeper level. Sahotra Swami is one example of someone like very, very brainy and had studied so much philosophy and this and that. And how many people could he speak with? So you might be a lonely genius. So again, the point to remember, only Krishna has full and complete intelligence. And Krishna, he's perfectly happy. And that's an important point we have to come to. Being very intelligent and learned and even being recognized for that doesn't necessarily mean we're very happy. Krishna has full intelligence, but when he's Vishnu, but when he wants to be super, super, super happy, then he doesn't take the role of being superior. He takes the role of the cowherd boy in Vrindavan. Remember that. The best intelligence is not to be an Einstein, but to be a devotee of a cowherd boy in Vrindavan. And Einstein's intelligence, only a tiny particle of Krishna's intelligence he gave to Einstein. So for us, real intelligence means, I'll quote the verse again, I quoted it yesterday, Tato du sangam utsrija, satsu sajjeta buddhiman, santa evasya chindanti manovya sangam uktibihi. For us, real intelligence means to find that kind of guidance of saintly people who can cut our bonds of material attachment. Intelligence, real intelligence begins with understanding that I should not be attached to things in the material world. This attachment is causing me so much trouble. But then also realizing that simply that realizing that the material existence is miserable, that is not enough, because material attachments are so strong that it overrides that intelligent understanding. Therefore, we have to hear again and again and again from saintly people about the nature of reality, about the nature of our relationship with Krishna, and even prior to that, or as an introduction, to understand nothing in this material world is of any real importance. No, it's not important. It's not important. Whatever you're studying, Einstein, E equals mc squared, whatever that means, yeah, okay, energy equals mass times the speed of light, whatever that squared, but whatever that means, I haven't got a clue what that means. Energy equals mass times how can you multiply mass by the speed of light? You're going to multiply some numbers, but and how is all the number? How does that all come? Space, time, warp, and space and time are the same thing, and we hear it, we can't begin to understand it at all. But it doesn't matter whether you understand it or not. We can understand that space and time, these are limits on us. Ulangita trividha sima utashishai, Yamunacharya. He states that Krishna is beyond the limits of space, time, and thought. So as much as we are enamored by space and time and thought, we're in the box. We're in Maya's box. Get out of the box. That's real intelligence. Listen to people who are outside of the box, who can tell us of the world, to give another analogy, the world beyond the frog's well, Dr. Frog's well. I was mentioning about Bangladesh, but how it's a little hard for me with not much intellectual life, but simple people, but simple faith in Krishna. Even without being a great genius, if one has simple faith in the holy names. One experience I had that it just stuck in my mind. It's a fairly common experience in Bengal. I was speaking with some people. There was one widow who was there, and she was quite devotional and not, I wouldn't say she wasn't shy, but she wasn't withdrawn. So we were discussing a group, and she was there also. It was it's some family, and it just struck me. I can't remember exactly what she said, but she said, everything in this world is meaningless. Govinda is all in all. That's all we have to aspire for. Something to that effect. I thought, this is great. She's got it. She's got it. She's never going to be like on the front pages or any of the pages of any newspaper. She's no prestige, nothing. She's a simple village widow, which is really socially from a very ordinary family, which means she's socially pretty much at the bottom of the pile. But she didn't have any inferiority complex. She understood and she wasn't saying it like in a sense of self-pity that, everything in this world is miserable, thinking, I could see that. It wasn't just thinking that everything in this material world is miserable, but if I could get lots of money and rewind my life and my husband would still be alive and then I could have silk saris and this and no such thought. She had realization. Everything in this world is miserable. Govinda, that's all. Simple people. Faith in the holy names. They can be misled also. But then even very educated people can be misled, and even very brainy people can get things seriously wrong. They do all the time. I mean, even in the material sphere, they can get things seriously wrong. So many scientists, they used to think, this is going back, to the late 19th century, when they discovered there's nothing in wood called phlogiston. They thought there's some element called phlogiston which makes the fire come out. But then they discovered, no, it's not like that. Real knowledge, even from the material point of view, to be well learned, even if one is not very deeply learned, if he has this culture, matrivat paradareshu, paradravyeshu lostravat. What's that? Atmavat sarvabhutanam yapashati sapanditaha. See, I forgot the words. I forgot the verse. But to know the import is what's really intelligent, not necessarily to learn 20,000 shlokas. So the import of this verse. One who sees every woman except his wife as his mother, who sees others' property as no more desirable to himself than some thrown-out garbage, who sees others like himself, in the sense, well, I suffer, they suffer, I'm just one jiva, they're also jivas, my interest is not any more important than theirs. Such a person is learned. Such a person is learned. Vedaisha sarveraham eva vedaha. Real learning is to know Krishna. In Chaitanya Bhagavat, I'll read some verses from Chaitanya Bhagavat. Tahare se bali bidya mantra adhayan Krishna pada poddeje koresh thiramon. One who has fixed his mind. This is Srila Prabhupada's translation because it comes from one of his Bhagavatam purports. One who has fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna is to be understood as having the best education and as having studied all the Vedas. Shei biddafal jani ho nishchoy Krishna pada podde jadi chitta britti roy. The perfect result of an education is the fixing of one's mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Digbijoy koribo bidda karja nohe, Ishware bhajale she bidda shatta kohe. Conquering the world by means of material education is not desirable. If one engages himself in devotional service, his education is perfected. In this regard, I'll quote from, that must be from Chanakya. Ah yes, that's from Chanakya. Vidvan sarvatra pujyate. That a king is respected, a man is respected in his own village, a king is respected in his kingdom, but someone who is learned is respected everywhere. And then so that in this verse we read from Chaitanya Charitamrita, talking about Digvijay, people who go here and there in debating contests and they win in debating contests. They're highly respected. At the present day, no one cares. It's hard to have a structured, intelligent conversation with most people, even people who are educated. There should be some, in our schools, there should be logic, maybe should be taught so that we can actually have discussions on a logical basis. Because, and we see often in discussions, they're just, even people, they may be quite intelligent and learned, but how their thought process is perverse sometimes, it seems. So, another quote from Chaitanya Bhagavat. Pare kene lok Krishna bhakti janibare, she jodi nahilo tobe biddai ki kore. The purpose of education is to understand Krishna and his devotional service. If one does not do so, then education is false. So, what is the conclusion of all this? Worship Krishna. He's Su-medhah. He's the best intelligence. The best use of our intelligence is not to waste our lives studying so many useless things which are of no use to us or anyone else. Surrender to Krishna. The name Su-medhah can also refer to Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu, who are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appearing with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, according to the well-known verse, Krishna Varnang Tvisha Krishnang Sangopangastra Parshadam Yagyai Sankirtana Prayer Yajantihi Su-medhah. So here the word Su-medhah comes. The one who is very intelligent worships Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by Sankirtan Yagya. So Nityananda does that, Advaita does that. They are Su-medhas. So in this way, the name Su-medhas can also refer to Nityananda and Advaita. I'll finish off this series of talks on the name Su-medhah by pointing out that after three names in this Vishnu Sahasranama, we have a similar name coming up, Satya-medhah. So if you are intelligently appreciating this discussion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you would like to hear more about the intelligence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from myself, who I can say is intelligent. I am intelligent. At least my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, has given me enough intelligence to understand that we should discuss topics of Krishna. So there will be more discussion along similar lines after three more names. If I don't survive or whatever, because who knows what will happen. But I plan to speak on Su-medhah, but if I don't survive to speak it, then you can contemplate yourself, chant Vishnu Sahasranama. So that's all I'm going to speak on Su-medhah for now. May Krishna ever be glorified by Vishnu Sahasranama. He will always be glorified by his loving devotees in so many ways. Devotees, they continue to express their realizations, to compose prayers in his glorification. One of the most famous and pleasing of the perennial acts of glorification of Sri Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is recitation and discussion of Vishnu Sahasranama. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Dante nithaya trinakang padayani patta kritvaja kushatmeta. Hey sadhava sakala eva vihaya durat goranga chandra charne kurutanuraga. Parivadatu jano yata tata va nanumokaro navayang vicharayamaha. Hari rasa madira madati mata bhuvi vilutama natama nirvishama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.